1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
One of the things we all have in common is we are also opinion makers in the field. We are innovators, we're influencers on this, and I think we sometimes forget that. And I wanted to talk about some shifts we see, and what I see are the future shifts that we probably want to be aware of. So a little bit about me. I'm at the Learning Games Lab at NMSU State University. We're a nonprofit development shop at the university. We develop tools and apps for a wide range of different audiences and content, and we do research on that as well. Some of my research areas include user testing and a few other things for fun. Okay, so I'm also a superhero movie fan, and I love them all. I just love superheroes and movies. And so this is from Thor Ragnarok. I don't know if you've seen it. I promise it relates, because here's what's happening. Dr. Banner, who's the Hulk, right? Dr. Banner is the educated guy that he turns into the Hulk, who's this big monster. And so Dr. Banner, Bruce Banner, and Thor just stolen, spoiler alert, a spaceship. And Thor's got stuff to do. So he's like, Bruce, you're going to drive. And Bruce is like, I don't know how to drive a spaceship. And Thor says, you have 7 PhDs, figure it out. And Bruce Banner says, but none of them are in driving spaceships. So this is kind of the problem in academia. We have very specific knowledge that's often difficult to apply broadly. And I think this is in some ways difficult for all of us because we are so embedded in this field of children's technology. We see the specific areas that we work so hard on because that's our job, is to drill down on those specific areas, and we sometimes forget the bigger picture. So mine went all the way through academia before I had children. So it is safe to say I believe in data, I believe in evidence, these are how I make decisions. And even given that, I will tell you one of the scariest points in my life is when you go take your child in to get a vaccination. Because even though I understand the data, all it takes is one kernel of fear in the back of your mind to turn that part off and say, gosh, I hope I'm doing the right thing. I hope this is what it is. And then you do the vaccination, you do them again, and then you review the evidence again, and you're okay. But fear turns off your logic part of your brain. And we have a lot of fear going on with technology. We all are so embedded in technology, we think this is how technology happens. My friends, Holly and Sydney, loving parents, and they're on each other's laps, and they engage in discussions, and they know what the other people are doing. And this is how we think parents often look towards technology, when I think it's actually more like this. They oftentimes are fearful and afraid and surprised at what they've seen, and they feel inadequate. And this is what controls the narrative more than the quality work that we might develop. So how do we shape that? Well, let's talk about screen time. No, I'm kidding. I don't want to talk about screen time because we all talk about screen time so much. But it's a really good example of how we have seen this narrative shift. It has taken us a long time. But we are finally starting to see more articles in the media and where people talk about it's not the amount of screen time, it's the quality. And we've had a role in shifting that conversation. We and all the conversations and talk that we do are starting to shift that to help people realize that screen time can include reading a book, that screen time can include communicating with loved ones, that screen times can make people more physically active. We are starting to shift that, but it has been slow and long, and we're on the cusp of what I think are 3 new trends where we're going to have to do that again. So here's what I think they are. Number 1, play is learning. And if Caroline were here today, you know, it's so wonderful hearing her and, of course, all the people we know and love at Tokoboku, because play is play is play, and we value it, and that's what we want to offer. And we all in the child development space are like, yes, play is awesome. But one of the things I think has happened with the increase of standardized exams is parents and other educators feel like they need to be able to articulate the learning that happens for their children. And they can look at math and say, that looks educational, or language acquisition, or these individual things. They can say, yes, I know what that is, that's learning, that's valuable, we want it, I don't see what you're doing, you're playing, it must be wasting your time. So as much as I want to say play in and of itself is enough, I think we need to start reminding people that play is learning. Because, of course, Fred Rogers' immortal words, play is the work of childhood. And we see that and we feel so good about it. We're like, yes, play is the work of childhood. And other parents are like, yes, Mr. Rogers. We all say, this is fantastic. And then parents say, yes, exactly. Now, remind me again why that is. Tell me again, what do we learn through play? Because if you're going to put me on the spot, I might have a hard time remembering exactly what it is. So it's not our job to necessarily play is learning, but I think we have a role in articulating how is play learning, to let parents in our community feel good about play. So we see a lot of different play, might be a simple tea party. Our job, of course, I could care less if children know how to execute a fully functional tea party. I think that would be lovely. We should know how to use clotted cream and what to do with the napkins and what time you have it and the difference between Earl Grey and oolong. That's lovely, but I really don't know if I want my kids to know how to have a tea party. It's all the skills they learn in pretending to have a tea party. In the same way, I don't know that I need my children to know how to play checkers. This is not one of the objectives all children should have, but it's a great way for learning turn taking. It's a great way to learn how to lose. It's a great way to set up. There's so many other skills that are similar. They need to be able to have conversations with people. They need to have turn taking. They need to have the bad experiences of play where they are frustrated and angry and maybe bite a kid or somebody else. There's some learning that happens there. They need to be bored. They need to be messy. All of these things directly apply to the skills we want children to have, but parents in our larger community sometimes have a misunderstanding of why that's valuable. So let's put some words on that and a structure that helps us do that. So I've been working with Susan for a while. She's brought me along very nicely. I'm learning all the time. And in her great words, sometimes simply knowing it is a thing is a thing. That's how social emotional learning works. Sometimes knowing it's a thing is the thing. And if we can just communicate, so what are the things? Okay, she introduced some of the 5 core competencies that we saw yesterday. I'm going to introduce those again because I love the grouping and the way it happens. So first, self-awareness. What do I know about myself? What are my triggers? How do I calm myself? What is important to me? What do I know about me and my space and how I am? There's lots of great examples. In fact, she has a handout that really lists some beautiful examples for these. Next, self-management. That, of course, builds. These are all interrelated. How do I calm myself? How do I, when I realize I'm on a path to go one direction, how do I start to take a different path? How do I soothe? How do I do self-care? All of this is in self-management. Then we are looking at social awareness. What do I recognize about you? How do I recognize your emotions as well as your intent and your decisions? How do I need to see how you react to different people? What is the situation? What is around? Then we're going to work on those relationship skills. How do you and I interact? How do I forgive you? How do we work through problems together? How do I understand when I work with you in one situation or when I work with you in a different situation? And then finally, responsible decision making. How do we learn ethical behavior? How do we make choices among decisions that are very hard because both decisions are equally good? How do we work through all of these issues? This is what we want for adults. Not necessarily they've memorized the rules to checkers, though that's good too. This is where we want our kids to be, and play is how we get through these. Our job is to help understand what that means and what it looks like. So how is play learning? The second, how is data being used? Okay, I got a call from my senator's office. They're looking at legislation. Everyone's starting to talk about data now. And it's not necessarily from a completely informed perspective. This is a whole new thing that has come up, and really what we care about is my child's data, because then we're talking about the kids, and we all want to protect them, and we need to understand how our data is being used, and what does that mean for kids. So how can we help shape these conversations? So recently, of course, I like the way this is presented. Cambridge Analytica, they were the problem here. Now Facebook had a role in that as well, because they were not responsible in keeping that data safe from the people who used it poorly. So this keeps the focus on that. Cambridge Analytica, if you remember, 50 million profiles harvested in a major data breach. It actually shut Cambridge Analytica down. Facebook has made major changes. But when this came out, everybody was like, what? But they were shocked at the wrong thing. They weren't shocked that Cambridge Analytica broke their agreement and the law by using the data illegally and in contradiction to their terms. They were shocked that Facebook collects data. Yes, Facebook collects data. And so there is a collective sigh of, I just don't think I'm going to use Facebook then because I think they're collecting data. But you know what else? Your vacuum cleaner is collecting data. If you want kids to do the Roomba, it knows your square footage, where your furniture is, if you have hardwood floors, how much dirt is being collected there. They can figure out with your zip code, your annual income, whether you're going to be buying new furniture, what room you're going to do that. Are kids in that room? Do you have dogs? Do you have pets? You got a tractor out there? Your tractor is tracking with GPS data your yield, your harvest, your environment, how much you're doing. They can absolutely estimate based on the time and the place where you live, your likely income from that harvest and when you're going to be ready to harvest again. Who owns that data? How about your coffee pot that you communicate with your phone, or your bed that tracks all bed-related activities so it can tell you when you're not getting enough sleep, or the echo, or the dot. Everything you can analyze in text. When you're putting text into a Google search form and computers can analyze that text, they can do it with photos and they can do it with audio, because they're always listening. And it's not a person with headphones listening, it's a computer listening that can do analysis of all of that. So any place you are putting data, into your baby monitor, to your Christmas tree lights, into your front doorbell, into your iPhone controlled dog picture taking, food delivery, I'm not sure what that's called, at the grocery store when you're buying groceries, it's looking at your trends and who you are, every photo with your GPS tagging, and yes, your social media. So this is not to terrify us and make us say, oh my gosh, it's to help us understand where data is being collected and make sure that our outrage is placed in the correct place. It's not, oh, I can't believe data is being collected. It's realize data is being collected. And the power is when all of this data is merged together. When they can figure out how many kids you have from your birth records, your address, your average yield of your farm, how much coffee you have to drink in the morning, and if you're getting a good night's sleep. And you put all of that together to make a profile of you. Okay, how do we deal with this when it comes to children? So I have a vested interest in this. We are a paid researcher with Messenger Kids, helping them develop their app. Fabulous experience. I very much believe in this product, and I love the researchers that I worked with there. This was released shortly before the Facebook data breach and the Cambridge Analytica data breach. So people responded in fear. Now, people responded in fear for a lot of different reasons. They have concerns for children talking to other people, and they say, what about children's data? Valid question, and that's important to ask. So what people tend to do is they say, okay, that's it, no data, no data. But I'm not sure that's what we want. Really? Do we not want no data? Because there's some pretty good uses of data, and I'm going to use that in the most important and valid way I can. Typing of the dead. Okay, so typing of the dead is not actually available anymore. It was a Sega game. So Typing of the Dead was a typing program. Typing is just rote practice skill development where you have a keyboard, and so the zombie will come at you and the letters breeze, and you have to type like B-R-E-E-Z, and every time you do, you fire a shotgun. The zombie's like B-R-E-E-Z, and then you just go through the town killing zombies with your mad typing skills. Now, what is this? It's so awesome, and it doesn't exist anymore, so please somebody bring Typing of the Dead back. I love it. Okay, so this and all other typing games are powerful because they track the errors I make compared to the errors Joe makes. And if it knows that I'm really having trouble with numbers, it will use that data to intentionally feed me phrases that have more numbers in it so I can get the practice I need. That's why technology is so powerful at doing differentiation. And if he's really having trouble with the Z and the Y, it'll feed him more words with that. That's a really good use of how data can make all learning experiences better. And that can happen in ebooks, and it can happen in children's apps, and it can happen in all those things. And if we say no data, then I get the exact same experience everybody else gets, which is overlooking a powerful use of technology. Similarly, in Plants vs. Zombies, they can figure out which plants I want to use, and they can manipulate me to buy them. And they can do that in Candy Crush or Fortnite or any of the games that are using data to manipulate consumers and their behavior. Or when my children are talking again on Facebook Messenger. So something that a lot of these companies aren't talking about when it comes to how this data is being used is it's to protect kids. So I mentioned, now if people are not listening into the dot and listening to every conversation, but I guarantee you, if you do a video chat or post a photo that has alcohol and drugs, and you have done a text chat at any point that has any of the markers for conversations of someone who is about to do suicide, it will be flagged and a real person will look at your account. And then they will take actions to try to make sure you are safe. Or if they are starting to see some of the triggers for pedophile and grooming behaviors, they will flag it and look at it. And if my kids are talking to other children in homes of other adults, I want some of those protections built in. I want to know that somebody is watching for the things you can look for in a photo, which could mean it's inappropriate. That is a valuable protection. And if I don't let Facebook look at the data of my children, I don't get that protection. Now, we can have discussions about where the line is drawn, but the important thing is those are the discussions we need to have, not just saying no data. Okay, GDPR, so General Data Protection Regulation. So this just went live last week. It rolls right off the tongue of Catalina and all folks over from the UK. So this went live in the European Union, or for anybody serving software over in the European Union. So what's interesting about this is it's brand new, so developers are kind of like, what are we going to have to do to align with this? So we're figuring that out. Basically, some of the rules that they have, number one, any data that's collected has to be anonymous or routine with a pseudonym. So I'm at a university. All the research we do has to go through an institutional review board. It has to be anonymous. It has to be reviewed. I have to have consent. So in our apps, we have never collected data because I take that very seriously. We're starting to see some of these trends over in the EU. So any data has to be anonymous or with a pseudonym. Highest privacy is the default, and people can opt in to less privacy. Any data that is processed has to be done by law. So not only do you have to do it, but you have to go get legal protection to make sure that what you're going to do with that data is protected. And you can opt out or revoke your permission at any time. Those sound awesome. That's going to be kind of tricky to implement. Have fun, children's technology field, figuring out what all those are. I suspect some of these will have some unintended consequences. Your coffee maker that wants to track data about you to recommend when it's time for you to go buy coffee, you're going to have to install it, and then it's going to have to say, we've given you the highest level of privacy. Do you want us to actually take off that privacy so that we can email you and track this data? You're going to have to put that in. It's going to be a little kludgy while we figure out how to do this. But this is the leading thing driving conversations about how can we start doing something. So, personal data. This is what I think is most important. I can't give you answers, but I want to give you guiding questions. Number one, how is my data protected? For the people who store my data, how are they using that and how do they keep it safe? And can I trust that they will do that well? And then this is crucial. How is it being used to manipulate me? This is perhaps one of the most important conversations I have with my kids. It doesn't work anymore to say, don't talk to strangers online. What's more valuable is, why would somebody want your address? What do you think someone could do with that? Why would somebody want that? Why would they use it to sell? When I'm at the grocery store and they're tracking how many times I bought Brussels sprouts this week, it's a lot. What can they do with that? They could raise the price of Brussels sprouts at certain periods. How is that data being used to manipulate me? That's a digital skill we need our children to have. How is the data collected? Under which terms? With whom? Is it shared? Is it sold? Is the company profiting off of it? And then finally, how do I consent and how do I revoke that consent? So these are pretty big questions that we're not going to just jump in with an 8-year-old on, but these are what should be guiding our digital literacy. So more important than us doing this is we need to be having these discussions with kids because they are growing up in an Internet of Things world where everything's connected and they need to start understanding what that means for them. So, one of my favorite, when you teach a child something, you take away forever his chance of discovering it for himself. So, if we're not going to be using technology to just simply teach, how do we lead to the transfer that we need them to have? Okay, so how and when does transfer happen? This is one of the biggest questions I'm dealing with at work right now, and we have asked this about preschoolers and tasting behavior. I spend a huge amount of my time arguing that transfer happens from gains, that my gains can teach math. Math's easy because it's just knowledge, and you can look at it and it looks educational, and it's somewhat easier to measure to see if that happens. But we're doing behavior change as well. Can we get kids when they're older to actually eat more fruits and vegetables by the tasting behaviors they do in preschoolers? Can we get them to cook vegetables? Because we know if they garden or if they cook vegetables, they will eat them. How do we get them to cook when their parents don't want to cook? Can we do that with an app? How do we get them to exhibit food safety behaviors? How do we get preschoolers to engage in the core physical activities that preschoolers are not getting? How do we get them to engage in Imagine tasting behaviors, understanding that repeated exposure increases in likeliness to try vegetables, that there's lots of different ways to describe food. So we do kind of some behavioral change stuff, and I'm always arguing, how does that transfer happen? Can I get you to be more financially responsible with an app about credit score? Yes, I can. I can tell you that transfer has happened. So though I spend a large part of my life arguing that technology leads to transfer, I am still always shocked when other people reach that conclusion. Where do kids learn to be so violent? And there he is right there with the cop killer video game. So how do we argue that on the one hand, technology makes transfer happen, but there are no validated and replicable studies that actually make the link between video games and violent behavior in this way? There is some very poorly done research, and that's the kicker. Is understanding this is complex and hard, and if it took us 8 years to get the screen time argument whittled down, we have got to start tackling the difficult decisions about this, and this baby is my big thing. Correlation versus causation. I'm sorry, I wish I didn't have to use these academic words, but this is so important. Okay, what is correlation and causation? This is it. Correlation is when two things happen at the same time. That's it. This thing happens, and this thing happens. Now, there is significance to the fact it's happening at the same time, but they are working independently, okay? Teenagers get acne. Teenagers see a lot of action movies. Those two things happen at the same time. It does not mean that acne prompts kids to go see action movies, and it does not mean that action movies give kids acne. Two things are correlated. Now, there could be another reason why both of those things occur. Hormonal changes create acne, hormonal changes like adventure and impulse. It could be a lot of reasons that cause both of those things to happen, but they aren't causing each other to happen. Correlation, two things happening at the same time. School shooters tend to be teenagers. Teenagers tend to play video games. People who were violent enough to create murder through school shootings often have psychological issues. People with psychological issues often take medication to work through that. It does not mean those things work together. People who have a dog are happier. Okay? Are happy people more likely to have a dog because they're happy and they want a dog? Does having a dog make a person happy? Or is there some outside influence that a higher income level makes you happy, a higher income level makes you more likely to have a pet? That's how we determine. Correlation means they're happening at the same time. Causality or causation is one thing influences the other thing. Oh, I need to fix this. There you go. Causation. One thing causes the other thing. Now this is a whole field of research. This is tricky and hard to do, and you have to look at numbers, you have to have enough people, you have to make sure if there's differences, they're mathematically significant. Identifying and locking down causation is rigorous, and there's processes, and that's why when I say let's see what the research says, that's what I mean. Let's go look at the people who have taken the time to do the research that can truly identify causation. That's what a lot of research is doing. And when we're talking about changing transfer, correlation versus causation is a really important differentiation, because media usually bumps to correlation and implies causality. They say two things happen together, and it's easy to say, oh, one thing must cause the other. I spend a lot of time talking about this. What change do I want to see in my learner, and what are the activities that make him through that change? I'll tell you this, for me, trying to get a kid from understanding a credit score, we look at how we want to learner change all of these different ways. And then we'll probably do an intervention that tackles like one or two of those things. We don't do an intervention that changes all of them. So I can get them to place coordinates on a line, right? That's a bump like this. Or I can get them to recognize credit score, right? That's a bump like this. I could get them to memorize some Spanish verbs. That's a bump like that. I could get them to completely change their moral outlook and change their ethical standards. Probably not. As I like to say in our assessment, it's hard to move the needle. So you can often move the needle from a change to there to here or here to there. You're not going to move the needle all the way over here. That kind of change doesn't happen. So when we're looking at how and when transfer occurs, number one, realize it's an incremental change, and we can measure those, but it's tricky. Number two, look at documented evidence, the people who are doing the research, to see if you can truly say one thing leads to the other. It's hard. And then finally, realize that knowledge and skill are more likely to change than core moral standards. That would be lovely if we could do some interventions that would just make everybody ethical. We're going to have to take those in incremental differences. So realize that when transfer happens, and people talk about transfer, technology is good at some things, but maybe not all of them. All right, so that's it. We're looking forward to shifting the conversations 3 ways. How is play learning? What can I do to educate people on how children's data is being used and shape that conversation? And then how and when does transfer occur? That's all I've got. If we have time, and I don't know if we do, I'd love to just have a conversation about what else you think should be on the list, or I've missed the point on any of these. I told you it was a lot of information.
Let's give Barbara a little bit of appreciation and a little love.